The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor of Shin Tower, and Elaine Beaumont stepped out like she had personally scheduled the sunrise. She was wearing a caramel-colored silk slip dress that moved with her like it had been poured on, cinched at the waist with a wide cognac leather belt, and over it she'd thrown a vintage ivory oversized blazer with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, structured on the shoulders, soft everywhere else. Her shoes were ivory mule heels, not the boring kind. These had a sculptural curved heel that made a satisfying sound on the marble floors. Her bag was small and boxy, chocolate brown Italian leather with a gold clasp, the kind of bag that didn't need a logo because it didn't need to prove anything. Her jewelry was understated. A thick gold cuff on one wrist, small hoops, and a single layered chain that disappeared into the neckline of her dress. But none of that was what made people look. It was the hair. Elaine Beaumont had the kind of hair that made you do a full double take and then pretend you weren't staring. She was black, deep, rich brown skin that had clearly been kissed by every Caribbean sun that had ever existed, and her hair grew thick and proud from her crown, but the color of it was something nature had decided to do entirely on its own. It came in at her roots as deep dark brown, then shifted, the way certain wildflowers shift in the light, into a warm auburn, then into an almost copper gold near the ends. No salon had done that. No colorist. It was simply what her hair had always been, genetic poetry from her grandmother's side of the family in St. Lucia. Women who grew hair like that the way other people grew orchids, rare and entirely without effort. She wore it today in a full, rounded shape, a high-volume natural that framed her face like a halo that had seen things. Her eyes were the other thing, large, slightly upturned at the outer corners, and the color was not quite brown. In some lights, they looked amber. In direct light, they looked like the inside of a honey jar with the sun going through it. It was the kind of thing that made photographers stop adjusting their equipment and just stand there blinking. Elaine did not know any of this about herself. Or rather, she knew it the way very beautiful people sometimes know it, distantly like a fact about someone else. She was 26 years old, had been living in Seoul for 2 years working in fashion marketing for a mid-sized agency, spoke Korean at a level she described to people as dangerous, meaning good enough to understand everything said around her but strategic enough to let people think she didn't, and she had applied to this modeling audition on a Tuesday afternoon because her coworker Priya had dared her over fried chicken, and she had never in her life backed down from a dare. The 14th floor of Shin Tower was currently holding 47 of the most beautiful women in Seoul. Elaine walked in and the room changed. Not in the way rooms change when someone elegant enters. In the way rooms change when something unexpected enters. Like when you're at an all-white dinner party and someone shows up in red. The waiting room was wide and sleek, white walls with track lighting, rows of chairs filled with women in various stages of perfect. Korean women, almost all of them. Some had the cool, professional stillness of women who had been to dozens of these. Others were nervous, touching their faces, adjusting their hair. All of them were dressed with the precision of people who understood this was a competition. Structured cords, tailored blazers, minimalist heels. Beautiful, yes. Polished, absolutely. And then there was Elaine. She found a seat near the middle of the room, crossed one leg over the other, opened her small bag, took out a mango-flavored chew candy. The Jamaican kind, her mother sent them in packages every month and popped it in her mouth. The whispering started. From the left side of the room. She heard it. She heard everything. She had been hearing things people thought she couldn't hear for 2 full years in this country. She let her eyes drift around the room slowly, pleasantly, the way someone watches a nature documentary. A girl 3 seats down. Long legs, severe bun, cheekbones that could cut glass. Leaned to her friend and said in Korean, "Did she walk into the wrong building?" Her friend pressed her lips together. "Maybe she's looking for the international food market." They both laughed. Quietly. The kind of quiet that wasn't really quiet. Someone else, from the row behind. "Did you see the hair? What is that?" "I think it's natural." "Natural?" "It looks like she let a sunset fall on her head." More laughter. It was spreading now, the slow, polite cruelty of a group of people who feel safe because they believe the subject cannot understand them. Elaine unwrapped another mango chew. A woman near the check-in desk, older than the rest, mid-30s maybe, the kind of beautiful that had been professionally maintained, looked at Elaine with something beyond amusement, something more pointed. She looked at Elaine the way certain women look at things that confuse them and then decide the confusion is the other thing's fault. She said, loudly enough in Korean, "I'm not sure what look they're going for, but I don't think that is it. This is a luxury brand campaign, not a festival." Several women laughed openly this time. Elaine finished her candy. She folded the wrapper into a precise little square. She placed it in the small side pocket of her bag. She recrossed her legs. She looked, slowly, at the woman near the check-in desk. And then she spoke, in Korean, clear, unhurried, with the particular Seoul accent she had picked up from spending too many evenings watching crime dramas with her neighbor Mrs. Han. "I'm sorry," she said pleasantly. "I didn't hear all of that. I was distracted by your before photo." Dead silence. The woman blinked. Actually blinked, as though language had just done something it wasn't supposed to. Elaine tilted her head sympathetically. "I just mean, you look so much better now. The surgeon did a wonderful job. You should leave a review." Someone in the back row made a sound like they were trying very hard not to choke. The woman near the check-in desk opened her mouth. Closed it. Elaine smiled. It was the most gracious smile in the room. "I'm sorry. I'm being rude. I haven't introduced myself." She raised a small hand. "Elaine Beaumont. I speak Korean. I've spoken Korean for 2 years. So if anyone else has commentary about my hair, my skin, my building choice, or the color of my eyes, please, we're all adults." She looked around the room with an expression of warm invitation. "I'll wait." Nobody said anything. One girl in the second row was visibly shaking with suppressed laughter. Not at Elaine, but with her, the kind of laughter that escapes when something is so precisely aimed that the impact registers in your whole body. Elaine settled back into her seat. "No? Wonderful." She looked at her nails, which were done in a soft, milky beige. "Let's have a nice audition." What nobody in that waiting room knew, what nobody in Seoul generally knew, because Elaine moved through the world with the relaxed confidence of someone who had never needed to announce anything, was where she was from. She was from everywhere. Her mother, Claudette Beaumont, was Saint Lucian. Born in Castries, raised on the northwest coast in a house that was painted the color of ripe guava because her grandmother had wanted it that way and nobody argued with her grandmother about anything. Her grandmother, Mamie, everyone called her Mamie, had been a woman who made the best bouillon in the entire parish, who wore her gray-streaked hair in a high coil, who had eyes the color of cane sugar in firelight, and who had once told a man who was rude to her in a market that he had the face of something that had given up. Mamie was where Elaine got her mouth. Her father, Desmond, was second-generation Trinidadian American, from Brooklyn by way of Port of Spain, a man who could play pan steel, cook polo, and parallel park in any city in the world without turning the wheel more than twice. Elaine had grown up in Atlanta, spent summers in St. Lucia with Mamie, learned to cook from her aunt in Brooklyn, learned stubbornness from all of them, and arrived in Seoul 2 years ago with 2 large suitcases, an open mind, and the absolute refusal to be small in any room she walked into. This was perhaps genetic. Mamie had never been small in any room. The audition room was called 15 Minutes Later. They went in groups of 5. Elaine was in the 3rd group. She walked into the white studio room with 4 other women. There was a photographer, a stylist, 2 assistants with clipboards. There was a backdrop. There were lights, standard, and there was a glass partition at the far end of the room, behind which sat the people making decisions. She couldn't see clearly through the glass. Frosted. Just shapes, dark figures, the suggestion of people watching. She didn't think about them. She thought about the light. She had learned, from 2 years of working adjacent to photography, that the trick was never to perform. The trick was simply to be. Most people walked into a camera and started trying. Trying was visible. To photograph terribly. She stood where they asked her to stand. The photographer lifted his camera. And Elaine looked at the lens the way Mamie used to look at the sea from her front porch. Not with effort, but with the comfortable recognition of something that had always been there. The camera clicked, and clicked, and clicked again. Behind the frosted glass, in a room that was too cold because Shin Jae-ho kept every room he occupied too cold on principle, 5 people sat reviewing the proceedings. Shin Jae-ho himself sat in the center. He was 32 years old. He was, by most objective assessments, Unfairly beautiful in the specific way that certain Korean men were unfairly beautiful. High cheekbones, a jaw that looked architectural, dark eyes that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. He was 6 feet tall, wore his clothing the way people who don't care about clothing somehow always wear it best. Today a charcoal double-breasted suit with no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt open, a watch that cost more than most Seoul apartments. He had the particular stillness of powerful men who learned early that they never need to fill silence. He ran 3 legitimate companies. The fashion brand Co Noir was the smallest and the newest, a personal project, something he'd built because he found the industry interesting and because he wanted to. The other 2 companies were things people in certain rooms knew about and people in other rooms didn't ask about. He had been watching the auditions for 40 minutes with the particular expression he wore when something was taking longer than it needed to. Then the 3rd group walked in. He noticed her in the first second. You would have had to be medically incapable of noticing to miss her. The hair alone rearranged the visual composition of the room, and then there were the eyes. Even from this distance and through frosted glass you could see they were unusual, and then there was the way she stood, like she was doing the room a favor by being in it, not arrogantly, just settled, rooted, like a woman who had never once needed to ask permission. His assistant, Hyun-woo, said something next to him. Jae-ho didn't hear it. He was watching the way she looked at the camera. Not at it, through it, like she was looking at something considerably more interesting on the other side. The photographer's pace changed. He'd been moving efficiently, professionally, the way a man who has done this 1,000 times moves. Now he was chasing something, adjusting faster, circling, trying different angles. That meant something. Jae-ho sat forward almost imperceptibly. Hyun-woo noticed. He said nothing. He had worked for Jae-ho for 4 years and he had learned to read the millimeter adjustments. The session ended. The group filed out. Jae-ho sat back. He picked up the glass of water on the table beside him. Took 1 sip. That one, he said. Hyun-woo looked at his clipboard. Which? The one with the hair. He set the glass down. Find out her name. Hyun-woo made a note. And the others? Jae-ho glanced at the remaining group's names on the schedule. We'll finish. But we already have what we came for. He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a man closing a file. He didn't examine why he wanted to know her name. He didn't examine why he was already calculating how long the post-audition process would take and whether there was a reason for the final callbacks to be conducted in person. Shin Jae-ho was a man who knew how to acquire things. He was very good at it. He had, in 32 years, acquired companies, buildings, loyalties, silence, and respect. He had never, in 32 years, sat in a cold room behind frosted glass and wanted, specifically, to know what someone sounded like when they laughed. He filed that fact away without looking at it directly. On the other side of the glass, Elaine Beaumont was gathering her bag, rolling her neck once, and thinking about where she was going to get dinner because she had been in that building for almost 3 hours and she was genuinely considering the barbecue place 2 streets over. She had, by this point, entirely forgotten about the women in the waiting room. She had made her point. She had moved on. This was, Mamie would have said, correct. The text came on a Thursday morning at 7:43 a.m. Elaine was standing in her kitchen in her apartment in Mapogu, wearing an oversized vintage tee from a 1994 Trinidadian carnival that had belonged to her father, her hair wrapped in a large copper-colored silk scarf, eating leftover rice and stewed chicken she had made on Wednesday because Seoul had many extraordinary qualities, but finding properly seasoned stewed chicken was not one of them, and she had learned to make her own. The text was from an unknown number. It read, in Korean, Shin Noir brand, callback confirmed. Saturday, 10 a.m. Shin Tower, floor 22. Dress code, yourself. Elaine read it twice. Then she looked at her rice. Then she read it again. Dress code, yourself. She had never in her life received a callback instruction that said that. Every audition she had ever heard of came with a list. Neutrals. Minimal jewelry. Hairback. The industry's universal preference for women to arrive as blank as possible so that the people behind the desk could imagine projecting something onto them. Dress code. Yourself was either the most arrogant instruction she had ever received or the most interesting one. She put her phone face down on the counter and finished her rice. Then she picked the phone back up and texted her best friend back in Atlanta, Solange. Not the singer, just a woman who happened to share the name and had fully leaned into the personality implications. A single message. They called me back. Solange's response came in 4 seconds. Elaine Celestine Beaumont, I told you. Then immediately after, what are you wearing? Elaine smiled. She put the phone down. She had 2 days to figure out what herself looked like when herself was walking into the 22nd floor of Shin Tower for a brand callback. She went to her wardrobe. Saturday arrived the way good Saturdays arrive in Seoul in the right season. Clean air, thin gold light coming in low from the east, the city doing its beautiful thing where it looked. Simultaneously ancient and like something from 30 years in the future depending on which direction you turned your head. Elaine left her apartment at 9:15. She was wearing wide-leg trousers in a deep chocolate brown, the fabric a heavy crepe that moved architecturally, each leg clean and precise. On top she wore a fitted ribbed turtleneck in cream, tucked in. Over everything she had a long structured coat in a warm cognac midi length with a dramatic oversized collar that she wore flipped up on one side and folded down on the other because symmetry, she felt, was for people who weren't paying attention. Her shoes were square-toed leather boots in oxblood, low heel, with a gold buckle detail at the ankle. Her bag today was a crescent-shaped hobo in cognac leather that matched the coat. Her jewelry was one thing. A wide sculptural gold choker, matte finish, that looked like it had been made by someone in the 1970s who was having a very confident week. Her hair was out, fully out. She had spent Friday evening doing her wash day routine. The deep conditioning with the coconut and hibiscus treatment her aunt mailed from Brooklyn, the careful detangling, the shea butter and oil combination she had perfected over years, and today it sat around her head in its full, rounded, three-toned glory. Deep brown to auburn to copper gold. A woman on the subway stared at it for so long she missed her stop. Elaine noticed. She said nothing. She put her earbuds in and listened to a soca playlist from Trinidad and felt, as she always felt when the right song came on, like the ground was slightly in her favor. Floor 22 of Shin Tower was not a waiting room. It was, Elaine registered as the elevator doors opened, someone's office. Except it was the kind of office that made the word office feel slightly embarrassed. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides looking out over the Han River. Furniture that was minimal in the way that very expensive things were minimal. Not because there wasn't enough, but because everything there was had been chosen with such precision that adding one more item would have been gauche. A long, low white sofa. A concrete desk the size of a dining table. Bookshelves built into one entire wall. Floor to ceiling. Filled with what appeared to be actual books. Not decorative books. The spines were creased and varied and real. The lighting was warm and directional. There were no inspirational prints on the walls. There were 2 framed photographs, both black and white, both landscapes, what looked like the Korean coast in winter, and what looked like a market somewhere tropical, shot from above. A woman at a small desk near the elevator. Sharp blazer, efficient expression. Looked up when Elaine arrived. Beaumont, Elaine? That's me. Mr. Shin will be with you shortly. Can I bring you anything? Water would be great, thank you. She sat on the low white sofa and looked out at the river. She would admit to herself only internally slightly nervous. Not the performing kind of nervous. The alert kind. The kind that came from being in a room that clearly belonged to someone very specific and sensing that the someone was about to walk in. She had done some research on Thursday. After the rice. After Solange's messages. Shin Jae-ho, 32. CEO of Shin Group Holdings, which had its fingers in real estate, logistics, and private security consulting. The last one listed with a vagueness that a person with good instincts would notice. CO Noir was his newest venture, luxury fashion, 18 months old, already carried in 4 countries, educated in Seoul and then London. No public relationships, no scandals, or rather, the kind of no scandals that came not from clean living but from very effective management of information. The industry whispered about him the way industries whispered about men who had money that predated visible industry. There was an unofficial understanding in certain Seoul circles about who Shin Jae-ho was and what his various companies actually represented. Elaine had read 3 articles, looked at 2 photographs, and decided she would behave exactly as she always behaved. This was, again, Mamie's influence. Mamie had a saying, the same face for the governor and the fisherman, child. The moment you start rearranging your face for people, you've told them you believe they're bigger than you. Elaine had never rearranged her face in her life. She heard him before she saw him. Not loud. The opposite. She heard the particular quality of silence that moves differently when someone enters a space. A subtle pressure change, a shift in the room's attention even when the room was only her. Then footsteps, unhurried. The sound of someone who had never walked quickly because they had never needed to. Shin Jae-ho came through a door on the left side of the room. Up close was different from behind frosted glass. Up close he was. She searched for the word and landed on distracting. There was no more precise word. He was tall, broader in the shoulder than the photograph suggested, with a face that was doing several things simultaneously and all of them well. He was wearing charcoal suit trousers and a black cashmere crew neck. No jacket. Sleeves pushed to his forearms. His watch was on his right wrist. She noticed this because most people wore theirs on the left, and she noticed things. His hair was dark and pushed back, not styled aggressively, just moved aside, as though it had agreed to cooperate this morning. He looked at her. She looked at him. There was a moment, approximately 2 seconds, that lasted considerably longer than 2 seconds. Then Elaine crossed one leg over the other, settled back into the sofa, and said in Korean, pleasantly, "Nice office." Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like the precursor to the tectonic shift before the surface event. "Thank you," he said. He spoke Korean, with the particular clarity of someone who was also very comfortable in English and let both languages sit in his mouth with equal authority. "You're on time." "I'm always on time." Most people are late to these things. They think it communicates confidence. "Being late communicates that you think someone will wait for you," Elaine said. "Being on time communicates that you don't need the theater." He considered this. He came and sat, not behind the concrete desk, but in the low armchair perpendicular to the sofa. Close enough for conversation. Not close enough for anything to be strange. The assistant appeared silently with her water and was gone before Elaine had finished registering her presence. Jae-ho looked at Elaine with the direct, unperforming attention of someone who did not bother with social softening. "Tell me about yourself," he said. Elaine raised an eyebrow slightly. "The brief version or the real one?" "The real one." Elaine Beaumont, 26. "I'm from Atlanta, but I was made from Street Lucia and Trinidad. I've lived in Seoul for 2 years. I work in fashion marketing. I speak Korean, English, and enough French Creole to have an argument or order a full meal, which are really the only 2 things you need a language for." She tilted her head. "I applied to your audition because my friend dared me." The precursor to a smile again, slightly more visible this time. "You applied because of a dare." "I'm from the Caribbean, Mr. Shin. We don't decline dares. It's cultural." "Is that true?" "Functionally, yes." He looked at her for a moment. That direct, absorbing look. She returned it with the same equanimity she returned most things. "Your eyes," he said. Not a question. An observation. "Amber," she said. "My grandmother's. She got them from her grandmother. It runs in certain families from the eastern part of St. Lucia. Nobody fully knows why. My grandmother said it was because her people looked at the sea so long the color got into them." She paused. "That's obviously not scientifically accurate, but it's a better story than genetics." Something shifted in his face. Fully this time. Not the precursor. The actual thing, brief, contained, but real. A smile. It was, she noted with a kind of distant scientific objectivity, an extremely good smile. She filed that observation away and gave it no further attention. She was here for a job. "Your hair," he said next. "Also natural. Also Caribbean. My mother's family grows it this way. Specifically the color, it's not processed. It's not a style choice. It's just what my hair does. It's extraordinary." "I know," she said simply. Not vainly. The way you acknowledged a fact. He leaned back in his chair. He had, she noticed, the posture of a man who was at all times exactly as comfortable as he chose to be, no more, no less. "The other models laughed at you," he said. "In the waiting room." She looked at him steadily. "You were watching." "I watch everything." "Then you also saw what happened next." "I did. A beat." "You waited." "I always wait," she said. "It's more effective. If you respond immediately, you're just reacting. If you wait, you're deciding." She picked up her water glass. "I prefer to decide." He was quiet for a moment. looking at her with that particular absorption. "What do you know about Sio Noir?" he asked. 18 months old. Luxury ready to wear. Leaning heavily into minimalism with structure. Your aesthetic vocabulary is very clear, you know what you want it to say. Currently in Seoul, Tokyo, London, and Paris. Your campaigns until now have been beautiful, but they've all said the same thing. She set her water down. You want a face that says something different. What do I want it to say? That your brand doesn't belong to one kind of beautiful. She looked at him directly. That's why I'm here. Not because you want diversity for its own sake, you're not that kind of man, you're too precise for that. You want it because it's true. Because a brand that claims to be about the essence of a person and then only shows one kind of person is a brand that's lying about itself. The room was quiet. Jae-ho looked at her. You researched me, he said. You researched me, she replied. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on floor 22. Another beat. She watched something in his eyes do something she couldn't entirely name. A recalibration, maybe. The look of someone who had expected one thing and encountered another and was deciding, privately, how they felt about that. The campaign shoots are over 6 weeks, he said. 3 locations. Intensive schedule. He paused. It's a significant commitment. I have a job. We'll work around it. That's a confident assumption. It's an offer, he said. The assumption is that you'll consider it. Elaine looked at him for a long, even moment. Send the contract to my agency, she said. I'll review it. You don't have an agency. I'll get one by Monday. The smile again, fuller than before. Brief, but it reached his eyes this time, and his eyes were the kind of dark that depth lived in. And Elaine felt, somewhere in the vicinity of her sternum, a small and inconvenient warmth. She stood. She picked up her crescent bag. Thank you for the water, she said, entirely composed. Jae-ho stood as well. Automatically, she noticed the reflex of a man who had been raised with certain habits and kept them. He was taller standing. She was already aware she was tall. They were approximately the same conversational altitude, which was a strange thing to notice, and she immediately stopped noticing it. Beaumont, he said as she moved toward the elevator. She turned. The dress code. He looked at her. The coat, the trousers, the choker, the boots, the hair, all of it. You understood it. She pressed the elevator button. I always understand instructions, Mr. Shin. The doors opened. She stepped in. I just choose which ones to follow. The doors closed. In the elevator, alone, going down 14 floors, Elaine Beaumont pressed her lips together. Inconvenient, she thought. Deeply, deeply inconvenient. She put her earbuds in. She pressed play. A Marshall Montano song came on, the kind that started slow and then built into something you couldn't stand still to. And by the time the elevator reached the ground floor, she had shaken it off the way her people had always shaken things off, with rhythm, with humor, with the unshakable knowledge that she had not come to Seoul to be distracted by a man with good bone structure and a room full of books. She walked out of Shin Tower into the Saturday morning light. She had a job to get, an agency to find by Monday, and a very specific instruction to give whoever she hired. Read every clause. The agency Elaine found by Monday was called Prism Talent, run by a woman named Cha Suyin who was 41 years old, had negotiated contracts in 5 languages, and whose opening statement when Elaine sat down across from her desk was, I've already seen the audition footage. Shin Jae-ho doesn't call people to floor 22. Tell me your number. Elaine told her her number. Suyin didn't blink. She picked up her phone and started typing. This was the beginning of a beautiful professional relationship. The contract arrived Wednesday. It was 14 pages. Suyin read all 14 pages, made 7 amendments, sent it back, received a counter, made 3 more amendments, and by Friday afternoon it was signed and returned with a shoot schedule attached. 6 weeks. 3 locations. The first shoot was the following Thursday at a converted warehouse space in Seong-Sudong that Sio Noir used as their primary studio. The second and third locations were listed simply as TBD International. Elaine noted the international with interest and said nothing about it to anyone except Solange, who screamed into the phone for 45 seconds. You're going to fall in love with him, Solange said when she was done screaming. I'm going to do a job, Elaine said. Elaine Celestine. Solange. I watched 3 YouTube videos on contract negotiation this week. I am focused. You watched 3 YouTube videos on contract negotiation because you were nervous about a man. I watched them because I am a professional. You don't even have an agent, and now you have an agent and a 6-week contract with a Korean Mafia man who called you to his private floor. Good night, Solange. And you already know what his smile looks like. Elaine hung up. She sat in her apartment in the quiet. The Han River was visible from her window at a slight angle if she leaned, which she did sometimes in the evenings when she was thinking. She leaned now. She was not nervous. She was alert, the way she had been in the elevator coming down from floor 22. That specific alertness that meant something in her had registered a variable that her brain hadn't finished processing yet. She was from people who trusted their instincts. Mamie had told her once, sitting on the guava-colored porch in Castries watching the water. Your body knows things before your mind catches up, child. The trick is not to panic when that happens. The trick is to stay very, very still and wait for yourself to arrive. Elaine stayed very, very still. Then she went to her wardrobe and started thinking about Thursday. Thursday morning, Siang Sudong. The warehouse had been converted with the specific kind of taste that didn't announce itself. Raw concrete walls but warm lighting. Steel beams, but draped with muslin diffusers that softened everything. The floor was polished to a mirror finish in some sections, rough and unfinished in others. A deliberate contrast that Elaine, with her 2 years adjacent to fashion photography, recognized as intentional visual language. The space said, we understand both the hard and the soft. She arrived at 7:15 for a 7:30 call time. The creative team was already set up. Photographer Kim Juno, whose work she had looked up and who shot with a documentary instinct that made editorial work feel found rather than constructed. 2 assistants. A lighting technician. A set designer adjusting something in the far corner. A stylist named Park Myrie, who came toward Elaine with a measuring tape around her neck and an expression of intense professional excitement. You're taller than the sheet said, Myrie said immediately, looking Elaine up and down with the focused assessment of a woman for whom bodies were canvases. The sheet said 5'9". 5'10", Elaine said. I round down in paperwork. People get nervous. Myrie stared at her. Then she laughed. Short, delighted. Okay, good. Come. The wardrobe rack was extraordinary. Elaine stood in front of it for a full 30 seconds without speaking, which for her was significant. The pieces were, the word that came to mind was considered. Every garment had been thought about. A sculptural sleeveless top in ivory brushed silk with a deep cowl that pooled at the front. Wide palazzo trousers in a cream so warm it was almost champagne, with a flowing cut that would move like water. A long asymmetric skirt in black with a structured paper bag waist and a hemline that was longer on one side. A fitted blazer in a deep burgundy with peak lapels and gold chain link buttons. A dress. The showstopper. She could see it immediately. In a midnight navy with a plunging architectural neckline, draped fabric that twisted at the waist, and a high slit on the left side. Ciao Noir? She asked. All of it, Myrie said. New collection. Unreleased. You're the first person to wear any of this outside the atelier. Elaine touched the edge of the midnight navy dress. The fabric was something between silk and something she didn't have a name for, heavier than it looked, with a subtle weight that would make it hang in a way most fabric couldn't. He designed all of this? She asked. He approves everything, Myrie said. He has opinions. She said it the way people said things about bosses who were correct often enough that the opinions weren't negotiable. He'll be here at 9. Elaine filed that away. She had approximately 90 minutes before he arrived. Good. She preferred to be already working when people arrived. She preferred to be already in the thing rather than waiting for the thing to start. Let's start with the palazzo, she said. Myrie beamed. I already like you. Hair and makeup took 40 minutes. The makeup artist, a quiet, precise man named Dongwoo who worked with the focused energy of a watchmaker, understood immediately what Elaine's face was asking for. He didn't try to reinterpret it. He simply amplified. A warm bronzed glow on her skin, the kind that looked like she had walked in from somewhere with better weather. A precise wing on her upper lids that lifted the natural upturn of her eyes. A neutral lip that let the eyes be the statement. Her hair he left entirely alone after she explained her routine, and he nodded with the respect of a professional recognizing another professional's craft. She looked at herself in the mirror when he was done. She thought, like herself turned up. Good. The first setup was the ivory silk cowl top with the champagne palazzo trousers, and Myri had added a long gold chain belt wrapped twice at the waist and a pair of minimal ivory square-heeled sandals with a single gold ankle strap. The jewelry was architectural. Long rectangular gold earrings that reached her collarbone and moved when she moved. Juno positioned her near the concrete wall in the section where the rough texture met the polished floor line. "Just breathe," he said. "Don't perform." "I know," she said. He looked at her. He smiled. The smile of a photographer who had worked with enough people to know immediately who needed direction and who needed to be left alone. "Good," he said. He stepped back. He raised the camera. And Elaine breathed. She thought about the porch in Castries. She thought about the way the light came off the water in the late afternoon, that specific Caribbean gold that didn't exist in any other latitude. She thought about Mamie's hands braiding her hair when she was 7, the practiced efficient movement, the smell of the coconut oil warming in a small bowl. She thought about her father playing pan steel in the backyard in Brooklyn, the sound of it, the way it rang out over the neighborhood and people came to their windows. She didn't perform any of this. She just let it live in her face. The camera clicked, and clicked, and clicked. Juno lowered the camera after the first 3 minutes. He looked at his screen. His expression, carefully neutral until this point, broke open into something unprofessional and genuine. "Wow," he said, not to her, to himself. Elaine heard it. She said nothing. She simply waited for the next direction. Jeho arrived at 9:04. She knew because she heard the shift in the room. The assistant's posture changed. Myri stood up straighter from where she'd been adjusting something at the wardrobe rack. Even Juno's energy shifted, not deferential, exactly, but attentive. She was in the middle of the third setup, the burgundy blazer, which Myri had styled with nothing underneath and high-waisted black wide-leg trousers and oxblood leather ankle strap heels. A long pearl rope wound 3 times at her neck. Her hair today blown out slightly larger than its natural state, so it created an even more dramatic frame. She was standing near the set designer's installation, a large cracked antique mirror leaning against the concrete wall, which Juno had been using to create fractured reflections. She didn't turn around. She heard him cross the floor. She heard him speak to Juno briefly, low, 1 sentence, and she heard Juno respond. She heard him come to stand somewhere behind her right shoulder. She continued looking at the mirror. At the camera. Click, click, click. "Don't stop," Juno said. But he wasn't talking to her. She understood he was saying it to the room, to whoever had just arrived. 3 more minutes. A setup change. Myri came in to adjust the pearl rope. Elaine took the break to roll her neck, flex her fingers, look toward the water they'd set up for her near the monitor station. Jeho was standing next to Juno looking at the monitor screen. He was wearing black today. Full black. A black wool overcoat over a black turtleneck, black trousers, black shoes. The watch on his right wrist was the only interruption. He looked like a man who had decided once that this was his answer to getting dressed and had never revisited the decision. He was looking at the monitor with the same absorbing focus he applied to everything, apparently. She walked toward the water. She was aware of the moment he registered that she was moving. She felt the attention shift without looking at it. She picked up the water. She drank. She looked at him. "Mr. Shin," she said, "professionally warm. The precise temperature." "Beaumont," he said. He looked at her. The blazer, the trousers, the pearls, all of it. Something moved in his eyes that she was beginning to recognize as his version of a reaction he didn't intend to show. "How's it going?" "Well, I think." "Ask Juno." "I already did." "What did he say?" "A beat." "He said he's going to need more memory cards." Elaine felt the warmth at her sternum again. She took another sip of water. "Good camera," she said mildly. The edge of his mouth moved. "Beaumont. Your hair is larger than Wednesday." She looked at him. Wednesday was a meeting. Today is a shoot. She set the water down. The hair understood the assignment. He looked at her for a moment. That look. She was compiling a small internal taxonomy of his looks by now. The absorbing look, the recalibrating look, the look that preceded the smile itself. She was doing this the way she'd been told to do science in school. Observe, record, do not yet conclude. The mirror setup, he said. I want to see it differently. Tell Juno. I'm telling you. He looked at the installation. Move toward the mirror, not away from it. I want the reflection to be full, not fractured. She considered this. That changes the concept. Yes. Juno had a specific visual intention with the fracture. Juno works for me. So do I, she said pleasantly. But I'm the one standing in front of the mirror, so I'm a relevant stakeholder in this conversation. He looked at her. She looked at him. The room, which had gone very slightly quiet, continued pretending to be busy. Try it both ways, he said. It was the closest. To a compromise she suspected he came. Then we'll decide. That's reasonable, she said, as though she was grading the suggestion. She put down the water and walked back to her mark. She heard something behind her that might have been a short exhale. The almost laugh of a man who found something amusing and didn't plan to admit it. She filed it. Under inconvenient. They tried it both ways. Juno shot the fractured reflection first because it was his concept and he'd earned the right to finish it. Then he repositioned at Jaeho's direction, and Elaine moved closer to the mirror until she was almost touching it, and her full reflection appeared, her face and its reflection. The same face twice, amber eyes meeting amber eyes, the hair enormous and extraordinary, the burgundy blazer's peak lapels framing her collarbone, the pearl rope catching the light. Juno went very still. Don't move, he said, but softly, the way you said things to something you were afraid of startling. Click. Elaine looked at her own reflection. She had a habit, when she looked at mirrors, of seeing her grandmother first. The eyes especially. She wondered sometimes, looking at mirrors, whether Mamie had stood in front of her own reflection in Castries at 26 and recognized something looking back at her that was older than she was. Some genetic memory. Some inherited looking. She thought this, and whatever it did to her face, Juno caught it. He caught it 4 times in succession. Then he lowered the camera and said, very quietly, "That's the campaign." The room exhaled. Elaine blinked. She came back to the studio, to the Seongsudong warehouse, to the warm lights and the polished floor and the 3 setups still to go. She looked at Jaeho. He was already looking at her. He had been looking at her, she understood, for the entirety of that last setup. His expression was different from any of the ones she'd catalogued. It wasn't the absorbing look or the recalibrating look or the precursor to the smile. It was something quieter. Something that, if she'd seen it on anyone else, she might have called moved. He looked away first. He picked up his phone from where he'd set it on the monitor table. He said something to his assistant Hyun-woo, who had appeared at some point with a tablet and the specific posture of someone who had learned to be present without being visible. The professional distance reassembled itself. Over his face, across the room. Like a man smoothing his jacket after something had ruffled it. Elaine turned back to Myri. What's next? The navy dress, Myri said, eyes bright. The showstopper. The midnight navy with the architectural neckline and the draped waist and the high slit. Elaine looked at it on the rack. She thought about the rest of the day. 3 more setups. 6 more hours at minimum. Jaeho across the studio making decisions with that direct look and that contained smile and the watch on the wrong wrist and the room full of books she hadn't been able to stop thinking about. She thought about Mamie's porch. About staying very still and waiting for yourself to arrive. She went to get changed. She came out in the navy dress and the room did the thing that rooms did. Myri had added barely anything. A single wide gold cuff on her right wrist, strappy gold-heeled sandals. Nothing at her neck because the neckline was the jewelry. Her hair had been refreshed and lifted. Dongwoo had added the smallest amount of additional highlighter to her shoulders and collarbone, so that under the studio lights her skin held its own luminescence. She walked to her mark. She didn't look for him. She didn't need to look. She had been in this profession adjacent long enough to know that looking for the reaction was how you lost the moment. But she heard him, from somewhere to her left, say one word to nobody in particular. In Korean, quiet, not intended to carry. Breathtaking. Elaine looked at the camera. She let the word land exactly where it landed, in the warm, inconvenient vicinity of her sternum, and she breathed through it. Click, click, click. They wrapped at 6:17 p.m. The crew broke down. Myri covered the wardrobe rack. Juno reviewed cards with his assistant. The warehouse exhaled from its working state into its empty warehouse state, the light going cooler as the equipment came down. Elaine had changed back into her personal clothes, the chocolate wide legs, a fitted black long sleeve, her oxblood boots, her bag on her shoulder, ready to go. Jae-ho was near the exit talking to Hyun-woo. She walked toward the exit. Beaumont. She stopped. He finished his sentence to Hyun-woo. Hyun-woo made a note and walked away with the efficiency of a man who had mastered the art of the vanishing. Jae-ho looked at her. Are you free Saturday? She looked at him. That depends on what Saturday is. The international locations are confirmed. I want to review options with the team. I'd like your input. She raised an eyebrow very slightly. You'd like the model's input on location selection. I'd like your input, he said again. No elaboration. No justification. She considered him. The black coat. The watch. The quiet certainty of a man who had decided something and was waiting, without urgency, for the world to agree. I'm free at 2, she said. Floor 22, he said. I remember where it is, she said. She walked out. The Seoul evening was doing its beautiful thing. City lights starting to come on. The sky that specific deep blue it turned in the hour before full dark. The Han River somewhere to the south reflecting all of it back. Elaine walked to the subway. She noted, not looked back. She had also not needed to. She already knew, with the instinct Mamie had spent 26 years teaching her to trust, exactly what she would have seen. She put her earbuds in. She pressed play. Something slow came on this time, a Trinidadian ballad.
Besties, in this story we learned that your authenticity is not a disadvantage, it's your greatest power. Elaine walked into every room exactly as she was. No alterations, no apologies, no performance, natural hair, natural eyes, natural skin, Caribbean humor, Caribbean backbone. All of it fully present and fully unapologetic. The very things people laughed at became the exact thing that made her irrepressible and unforgettable. Besties, the world will often greet our uniqueness with mockery before it greets it with respect. That's not a reason to shrink. That's a signal that what you have is rare enough to make people uncomfortable. Besties, being the only one who looks like you in a room and choosing to stay anyway, being told you don't fit a standard that was never built for you, refusing to change yourself to make other people comfortable, letting your work and your presence speak louder than any response ever could, finding love and success not by chasing either one but by being so completely yourself that both had no choice but to find you. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.